Well, folks, welcome back to the Liquid Football Podcast here on the Monday Madness channel. Obviously, we take often a sideways glance at the world of football, and we try and devise some humor and comedy and all that sort of jazz out of it. But this edition is going to be slightly different in a sense because much like a lot of things in football, real life kind of gets in the way, and in particular, it kind of makes you, shall we say, readjust your absorption of football. It really has nothing to do with the fact that the Qatar World Cup is on and we're kind of flipping a coin to decide whether we actually like it or not. We don't. Um, but but this time out, and obviously you can probably tell from the title, we're going to have a discussion about what's been happening over in the United States, essentially into the National Women's Soccer League. Now, obviously, if you know anything about women's football, you know that the USA have essentially been the gold standard for quite some time in women's football. Obviously, things may be changing in that sense with the likes of England coming along and forming together a very, very strong team for sure. But the US have always been a bit of a gold standard. So you'd assume that the domestic league and indeed the whole system is squeaky clean and perfect and idealistic. But Burkbot, I think it's fair to say that is not the case at the moment.
Yeah, so two independent studies and reports have come out, one commissioned by the NWSL itself
Mm.
and one commissioned by the Players Association to try and kind of it shows that two reports had to be done to get the one result because so much more work has to be done in women's football, I suppose, to expose people for what they are, which is monsters, and all humans are monsters. Um, but yeah, basically what we're looking at is that the NWSL has had a history of um, abuse towards players, towards management, towards the structures within the game, and um, it is kind of akin, I would say, to the Catholic Church in Ireland with problematic priests. And you
Mm.
just move them from location to location and, allow them to keep repeating their offences over and over again, which is what's been happening with a load of managers and coaches throughout the NWSL over the last few years, where they would have I suppose a lot of these are alleged, so I don't know. Can I name the people? Well, the reports named the people. So
Yeah, I
like,
was about to say
Reports have do name them, so
yeah,
yeah.
the reports do name them. One of the things as well that I'd point out that these investigations have been going on for quite a while. They were started in the last October.
Yeah, it's been a full
mm,
year's worth, yeah.
and it's actually I was reading today they helped each other while remaining independent themselves. They both independently came up with,
Mm.
oh, we need evidence of that. And they're like, oh, actually, we have like shit tons of evidence of that. Here's all of our papers. Would you by any chance have any, evidence of against this guy? Oh yeah, here you go. Here's a crate of stuff here against this guy.
So it's like
Basically what
kind of like they were doing sort of like a panini sticker book of like sexual predators. Like, have you
ooh,
got
this
a
one's shiny.
have you yeah have you got a foil
You got a fall. You got a foil Paul Riley. Holy shit! If
yeah,
someone
absolutely. Anybody from Washington? Anybody from Washington? Oh yeah, oh, yeah, I'll trade you. You know.
that's the
But
person I
yeah,
need for
no,
my Chicago Fire team.
but yeah, what the two reports have come out with is that the higher ups of the NWSL actually knew about this abuse. Shockingly. I don't think that result is shocking to anyone. Um, but and that they put various levels of sugarcoating and pulling wool over people's eyes and allowing people to stay within the system. So Paul Riley being one of the most problematic ones and kind of the most, I suppose, well-known secrets, as it has been classified, that he would abuse both sexually, emotionally, manipulate young players, and like I've read some of the interviews, and it's quite harrowing, like
Mm.
reading them, that like players didn't necessarily know the situation was such a power imbalance, but that power imbalance was there. And then when they didn't feel like they could confide with any of their friends or teammates because it would look like, oh, I'm just trying to sleep with the boss to get playing time, and they're just kind of look at it like that, which is, and yeah, it puts the players in such a powerless position, and when they tried to speak out about it, the coaches moved on and it was quiet and it was hushed. So North Carolina Courage are getting quite pillaged in the case of that they are claiming they weren't told, whereas there's documentation saying that they were told in sugar-coated terms that this guy could cause problems, so just keep an eye on him, don't leave him alone with the players, which is not how you want to run a football club. But yeah, no, it's just I suppose as of recording, England and the USA are playing in a friendly game where both two sets of teams have been showing solidarity with the victims of abuse throughout by wearing really an unusual color. I don't disagree with it on a fashion sense. It's one of my favorite colors. A teal armband, and believe the players and protect the players is being kind of posted, like hashtag protect the players and stuff like that.
Yeah, they held up a big banner at the very beginning, like for the team photos saying protect the players. Just on a brief note, it is 1-1. Smith has just scored, but now there's a penalty for England.
Oh.
Apparently, Lucy Bronze's been taken out of it. But there's a curious thing. We'll go back. You mentioned Paul Riley there. It's weird when they said that we weren't aware of it, because when he was at the Portland Thorns, the investigation showed that Riley's behavior was brought to the attention of both either the NWSL or the USSF leadership every single year from the year 2015 to the year 2021. So they're going like, oh, we had no idea about this. I have literally told you about this every fucking year. For 7 fucking years.
The Portland Thorns, their main sponsor has come out with we are dismayed by the findings of the report released by the US Soccer Federation, and they counter our values as Tillamook County Creamery Association. And it's
you don't want to get the creameries pissed off in Portland,
The way you said it with such a country Irish accent. County Creameries.
That's literally how I read it. I don't know if there's any other way of reading it. No, but yeah, no, there's just I'm just reading, like, it is a live kind of update blog of all the different clubs putting out statements and sponsorships putting out statements, and it's kind of a collation of all of that data. But yeah, it's but looking at it just from American Mouthpiece, Megan Rapinoe has come out, and like, she's like, we have said this so many times, we in fairness to her, I know she's a love her or hate her kind of character in football.
Well, you only hate her if you're Piers Morgan, and in which case that's even more of a reason to love the woman.
But yeah, no, she's kind of been a spokesperson for the movement now, and kind of like, we back the players, and more needs to be done. Now we need to see the NWSL come out, because we know as a production line of fantastic footballing talent, it is a system in that respect that works. But if you're getting fantastic footballers, but at the expense of hundreds of others' mental health, and hundreds of others, sexual abuse, hundreds of others becoming victims of sexual or emotional manipulation and abuse, it's not, obviously things need to change, and players need to be protected, and that has to be the number one priority. The recommendations of the reports is that, like, a complete system overhaul, and I suppose as of the last 24 hours, we have people stepping down, people being removed from their clubs. Racing Louisville sponsorship deal has been reneged. They were meant to be getting a new stadium purpose built for the women's team, that might be put in jeopardy as a result of this.
That was Christy Holly at Racing.
Yeah, Christy Holly, yeah.
That was Holly, that one. Yeah. But yeah, there's just
I find it funny how the clubs are getting the kind of the backlash from it, considering that when these reports are being made, 3 of the clubs outright refused or tried to stop the reports from coming out. Like I'm reading here, like like you mentioned, like Racing Louisville there, they outright refused to provide any documents for the report, wouldn't allow witnesses to ask questions. So like the clubs,
Thorns did that as well. They tried to
the Stars did that as well, and so did the Red Stars.
During 2015.
Yeah.
So
like
as far
I
back as
find it
2015, the Thorns of Portland have been trying to like kill this.
I don't want to come across callous here, but it's a bit like fucking too little too late for the likes of the sponsors and the clubs themselves to start putting out statements when like it's very adamantly clear you have tried to block this for the entire time, and now you're gonna go all fucking thoughts and prayers about it. At this point, the horse is already bolted. Everyone knows.
Long so. I mean, like you go to Chicago with the Red Stars. Like players have been putting in surveys, and no, the Red Star was the one was Rory Dames.
Yeah,
but since 2014, the players have been putting in surveys calling Dames abusive and unprofessional. Like in player surveys, they've been saying he's abusive and that they were afraid of him, to be honest.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's 2014. And you're like, oh, no, we've no idea about any of this. I did not see it. You know, the car had a lot of problems. So are you fucking stupid? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, and what's crazy about all of this is that all of their it's not even really allegations because the investigations have all corroborated everything that's
every single
and he was thinking it's not an allegation then if two separate investigations, granted running concurrently, all come to the same conclusion. Like, you know, like if I think 2 + 2 is 4 and you think 2 + 2 is 4 and Burkbot thinks 2 + 2 is 4, we're not in a cartel. It's not a collusion. It's not a conspiracy anymore. It's because 2 + 2 actually equals fucking 4. Like that's all of this. That's all this is. It's insane. When you go through it all, and like it's endemic, and it does need to be burnt down.
I think that like this is an instance where I think you do need to burn down the entire structure because it's very clearly the people that are involved in these structures and involved in the presidencies, whatever it is. Like you can't, as you said, like this is coming from almost 2015, so this is a 7-year process almost. You cannot possibly have like forgotten this every single year. You have clearly tried to bury this as much as you can. And funny enough, because of like other instances in other kind of in other walks of life, like the Me Too movement and so forth, like you can't once that starts snowballing, it's very hard to stop that. It's particularly if you're in somewhere where the abuse is very evident. Like football, we know from even on the men's side, we know about the sexual exploitation just from that alone. So you imagine how bad it is on the women's side. That is just the fact that like now that there's more of a lens on women's football, there's more of an interest and there's more of a desire for it to actually work. This is the stuff that you have.
And it's not just a case of there's sexual abuse happening in this women's team, and you know, isn't that sad? You know, like there's actually, well, no, hold on. We're trying to treat this with equality. We're trying to promote this as equally as we possibly can, which means that the clubs have to be equally responsible. That if this was a men's team, if there was an underage academy team,
absolutely,
But like even the reporting on some of it over the years, like if you look back through some of the archive, kind of, coach has left the training squad after incident, you know, or there was, I think, was it Richie Burke? Is that no relation to the Burke bot? But I think that was the name that he was just told. Like there was a press announcement, like, he's moving to front of house. So he was coach of the football team, but he in the club statement was moved to the front of house, and people were like, well, that's a really strange way of removing him from players.
Yeah.
Because obviously
he's still employed at the club. He can still abuse if he wants to. That's the thing. He still has a level of influence.
And then as it turns out, of course he was abusing the players. You know, that was why he was being moved out. It's like, move him to the next parish onwards. You know, he can't do damage out there. He's behind a desk, goddammit. He can't sexually abuse from behind a desk. Well, of course, I'm making light of it, but I shouldn't be making light of it.
No, you're not making light of it because that was genuinely the attitude. Was the fact that like, he's no longer managing or he's no longer coach of the club. He shouldn't. In theory, he shouldn't have contact with the players. Of course, he fucking does, because like I said, if you're looking at someone, even like say, like we mentioned Christy Holly there as well. Like the exploitation that he was coercing players into fucking sexually explicit photos, you know. And if she doesn't reciprocate, she doesn't get in the team, you know. And like I said, these are like the actual the cutoff for for the age bracket in women's football can be wider in a sense. So like you could have people who are 16, 17 playing for these first teams. Again, much like the men's side, depends on the circumstances. But like you can't have that sort of stuff going on, or even like again, this is gonna be very like horrible details, but like there's instances where it's supposed to be like a like game analysis sessions, and they're not watching the game, like they're watching pornography, and that's unacceptable as well. But again, this is not an isolated incident. This has been proven to be a pattern. This has been proven to be something that he's been doing systemically at this club. The club knew about it very clearly, because for 7 years, you can't just fucking bury your head in the sand. Too many people, too many voices are saying he has been doing this. The club have decided to let it go. And as you said, in the case of Burke there, he was just moved to a different, he was redeployed essentially. Like, you know, like it's like saying like, okay, what are we doing with Jimmy Savile? Oh, well, we've heard rumors about him. Oh, that's what we do then. We'll just turn him into a fucking postman. It's like, what? No, it's not going to work at all. Like,
we just took him over to UTV there.
Yeah, we'll just have him do the fucking weather instead. It's like, yeah, great. He's still in fucking television, you assholes. He can still do stuff. That's the argument. I'm of course exaggerating, but like the principle is still the same. You can't have people who have a pattern of systemic abuse still within an environment, within the ecosystem, to still cause some level of emotional torment. Because if you know for a fact that like if you've done damage like this already and they're doing stuff of a sexual nature, you can imagine the level of blackmailing, the level of emotional manipulation, all this sort of stuff. Again, these are girls who have been like, who are in a system who they think like, we don't know where they're coming from as well. This might be all they know. This is the system they've grown up in. They just kind of accept it as what it is, and that's totally unacceptable. You know, like I said, they made it like we made such a huge story about the youth academies in certain countries, and rightfully so, because that is horrendous abuse. It will be, and it should be the same for women's football, especially in the US, that you know purport themselves to be the best national team. This is the cost of it. This is at the expense. You know, how many players have been have had their careers ruined because they've either been in such a horrible mental state to continue playing, or because of circumstances beyond their control have not been allowed to play because they've spoken out, or they said no, and they've been dropped and their careers are fucking gone. Like they work on scholarships like NFL. Like if they don't play, then they don't get their scholarship and they're done. Their talent's gone. And it's a horrendous system. It's a horrendous
I was listening to an interview with a sports psychologist, and just how like academy football is so different from senior football, and that it like if someone is going through or is feeling coerced or is feeling you kind of, when you're young and you're in the academy and you want to become a professional, and the coach says you need to do this to become a professional, like that is the end goal. So you are going to feel like if the coach is God in that kind of case, if the coach says you need to do this to become professional, then you know you're streamlined into thinking this is what I have to do. Like you kind of weigh up the pros and cons, but it's kind of blurred because you're in that situation where someone who is in charge and someone who has a say in your future is telling you what to do. You're going to do it, and when the stakes are that like high and you know that loaded for people that age, and that's where a lot of the cases are like, these are young impressionable women, or they're people in precarious
they're vulnerable women, like
they're, and it contractually as well as physically and whatnot, but you know like what has to be done is from the academies up, like obviously keeping the physique and kind of fitness element and technique element going in the academies is essential, but the well-being has to now be at the forefront of all the academies. I think like that, burn it down to build it back up again. But in saying that, as of recording, the NWSL actually have no plan for the you know, they have no plan, you know, which I suppose is a good way, that they're not just jumping in and saying, "Oh yeah, we're just going to change everything." I think they're being a bit level-headed about it. But one of the things is they don't have, they are bringing in a mandate, because they don't already have it, which I think is ridiculous that they don't have it, is a uniform minimum standard for background checks. So like, surely, I don't know, dealing with the admin side of a sport, which I do, in my spare time, very little of my spare time, I spend most of my time doing admin for a grassroots non-profit, well, non-profit for players, sport, and the absolute level of litigation and paperwork I have to go through to be allowed to be in the presence of children under 18.
Oh yeah.
And there is a minimum standard that everyone has to meet to be able to set foot onto the side of a pitch.
Yeah.
And how that's the case here and not in a professional setup in a league that has been going for years in comparison to the relatively new, I suppose, formation of the sport that I am involved in. But yeah, the fact that they're like, oh yeah, sure, we're gonna bring in that mandate of like background checks. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why? Like, surely this is number one thing. If you keep, it's like, we keep getting burgled, but like we keep leaving our doors open. But changing the whole policy, like we don't need to get new locks, then we'd have to remember to bring our keys with us. And it's just a whole thing. Like
It's like you're getting burgled, but like, but there's so much effort just buying a door to begin with. You know what? Let's
I can't be reaching. I can't
the
be
burglars won't take anything.
Yeah,
They won't.
I can't be reaching out and closing my windows. Fuck that. Yeah, no, it's the same. I've been vetted a few times because I used to train kids. As a boxing trainer, I used to train the kids. And if you're doing any kind of if you're in any kind of position of power over a younger person, regardless of sex, you needed to be vetted.
Of course.
And that was it. And that was the minimum standard. Like you needed that. You needed a Garda vest, so you needed a cert saying yes. You needed your certificate of not a nonce. Boom. And
but that should be a simple thing. But that's the thing. But there's also reasons why that was never implemented in the first place. And the reality is that a lot of people in those positions rather liked the fact it was the Wild West, that they were able to get away with what they wanted. Again, we talk about the Me Too movement. There's people in positions there that didn't want anything like that coming out because essentially their power point was there. It would have been taken away from them. Like as a wrestling fan, over the COVID break, we had the Speaking Out movement, which was essentially the same thing, but on a rather more local level in a sense. We know who these people are, you can name them and blame them and all that sort of jazz. But the same thing, the same issues what happened here. There were in certain areas where you think, oh, they're surely too big to not have the system. No. They're like, if you wanted to fucking train 16-year-olds in wrestling in the UK, you didn't need to be police vetted. You could just do it. And lo and behold, half the coaches were dating 16-year-olds when they're in their 30s. So like it's going to attract, like shit attracts flies at the end of the day. And if you don't clean up that, then naturally they're still going to keep going up. You need to find as a level, you do need to implement the structure. But like I said, if you have a system that is encouraging that behavior, and then you have people then who, again, have lived through the entire system and are taking advantage of this power fantasy that they now have, then of course they're not going to want to change it. The people involved, like if we mentioned the federations there, the USSF and then NWSL, there has been no doubt people that are involved in this that are actively encouraging this behavior because, like I said, where else would you get it? Where else could you do it?
And you see the coaches that are that way inclined have moved across to there now, and I'm absolutely not saying that the FAWSL is completely clean. I have no authority to say that.
Well, I think the Mark Sampson situation years ago indicates that there is a lot to be dug into.
I don't think there's any sort of organization that's going to be completely innocent of all charges. But when you've been found out by two separate investigations to be actively hiding abusers and rehiring and relocating abusers and people who are not there for the welfare of the players, then the things need to change, and absolutely there needs to be accountability.
Yeah, and accountability, like you were saying, there was a raft of resignations and stepping downs and shit like that. It's like, no, fuck that. These people have to go to prison.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, resignation isn't enough. Like these are sexual predators. Like sexual predators, fucking like exhibitionists. I don't know whatever terms you want to call them, but there are actual fucking crimes mentioned in these reports that should be prosecuted.
The thing about what we mentioned, the Red Stars head coach, the former Red Stars head coach Rory Dames, he resigned back in November, like last November, 21. Amid allegations of abuse. It's like he's not going to. He resigned a year ago. It's like he's not going to prison.
No.
Stay in fucking prison. Like, these people need to go to fucking prison. Like, I thought oversimplify a situation, but these people need to go to fucking jail. Like,
yeah, they should.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like this report should be a springboard into catching half these people that were named and shamed. Like if there is enough evidence to compile reports from like 2 or 3 different sources. But again, that's also a wider conversation about how even the police are investigating this in the US. Do you actually believe these women half the time? And like realistically, they probably don't.
Well, the investigations have corroborated everything.
But that means fuck all. Like people still get off scot-free from it. But again, that's a conversation that you have to leave to the law and order in a sense.
Yeah.
At least from the reporting point of view, like the reports have done their work. They have proven outright that this has been happening and it's systemic and it's rot. The whole system is rotten to the core. The question is now what should they do next? And again, this would hopefully open a wider conversation, because if this is happening in the US, then realistically it's going to happen in every other league in every other country.
And you've got the money and you've got the I suppose, somewhat job security in the US because they are professional and it is quite a high grossing league, that they have that security to kind of like, actually, no, I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen. If you're playing for, a very low wage at a very, bottom rung of professional football or semi-pro level, maybe you're on the cusp of going pro, you don't want to step out of line because you might ruin your chances of going pro. Or maybe, it's just a case of you genuinely don't feel safe enough to step out. Like the fact that these players and the staff involved in some of these clubs that have come forward and have given their evidence and kind of tried to get these managers out. And I think it must have been very disheartening. I'm sure like people can resonate with this, like with different walks of life, where you make a complaint about someone, whether it's a bad boss, whether it's a bad priest or whatever, and you see them just being moved on to continue their abuses of power.
It's almost a stalemate almost.
And that's going to make people, well, what's the point? What's the point in reporting this? What's the point in going after this guy when he's clearly going to get away with it the next time? And I know we've been saying guys this whole time because the majority have been male, but there was Elise McHugh, I think their name is, from Gotham. I'm butchering her name, but she was like the general coach or general manager for Gotham FC, which is a kind of relatively new club. It was up and coming club. There was a lot of press around it, and it was a kind of a vague statement, kind of saying, "Oh, just abuse and making the working environment, unsafe for players." So, like, I know we've been mostly mentioning male abusers, but apparently
but she's a product of that system though as well. Like I said, not to defend their actions or anything like that, but like they're clearly something that has been, in a sense, beaten into her from the start, and half these people who are now in the system are corrupted by that as well. So when you have a corruptible system, it's going to corrupt people by association. It's almost like an infection.
Do you know, one of the things I saw this, I don't know whether it was on Twitter or whether it was on another platform, but it was kind of a thought piece, a think piece, kind of where you can kind of get into the mindset of a player or a teammate says to you, "Oh, this guy, he's a real prick to me. He hates me. He's abusing me. Like he's emotionally like, horrible to me." And then they're like, "Well, no, he's nice to me. I've never seen him do any of these things."
Too, yeah.
And there's obviously, for every one or two players in the squad that the managers pick on and prey on, there's an entire squad that are, well, he's nice to me, or she's nice to me, or I've never seen that kind of behavior before, so I'm not going to step out of line and risk my career or risk my place on the team to listen to these people. And that's kind of another kind of aspect to it as well, that you've got to listen to people and take on board their concerns. And if they are for every unfounded concern, there's always going to be a founded concern, I think. There. So,
well, thankfully that tide seems to be somewhat turning, particular if you're Spanish, because the entire Spain team have decided no. They're not going to be coached by Jorge Vilda.
And Spain are like, okay, you won't be coached by Jorge Vilda.
You won't
be coached.
Like, they're totally standing by him, right? So they're missing 17 of their best footballers, right? Because they all signed, 15 of them signed this huge email stating that they just didn't want to be coached by him anymore. They pointed out, now, this is one of those things where when you start reading, you're like, okay, then fine, right? So lack of tactical knowledge and analysis around the backroom staff, insufficient physical preparation, and the quality of the training sessions have been quite alarming. With one player saying she always felt in a worse condition when she returned to her club than after training with the national team. So you're like, all right.
And the injuries in their camp would also support those concerns.
Absolutely, them being knocked out by England in extra time in the quarterfinals and the Euros. Apparently, that was the boiling point, tipping point, whatever analogy you want to use for it. But then, like, you read like other things there where until 2019 there was a rule that the women players could not lock the doors of their hotel rooms at night while on international duty. They had to wait until the manager came over, checked everything was fine according to his standards, and then they could lock the door and go to sleep. And then you're going, okay, this took a hard left into seriously fucking weird territory. That was 2019.
Yeah, so what's the criteria? It's just like, oh yeah, they're all sleeping and I'm able to watch
What are his standards?
Yeah,
like,
what's the
this
standards?
is fucking crazy. Now, be aware that the Spanish national team are not accusing him of sexual abuse. I don't think so.
No, it is. No. It's emotional.
It's a general discomfort in the group.
Yeah.
They say, I think it was Guillardo was saying alongside Hermoso, two decent players, I think we'll find. Pure decent. We have a group that can achieve big things. After what we went through the Euros and the months after, we want to share with the FA our thoughts as a group. We're ambitious. And by the way, you fucking well on them. When you see that fucking Spanish team, you're like, they should be killing everything. Like, they should be literally winning all of the stuff. Like, all of the things, hand them all of the trophies. And there's like, it's about being brave. Sometimes you need to say things which sound unpleasant to make things change. So it's basically, but the Spanish FA are sticking by him. I mean, they've got people like Alexa Putellas coming out and going like, that's a 2-time Ballon d'Or, the most Spanish player, going
best player in the world at the moment.
Do you know what that says?
Highest FIFA card.
If one player on the Argentinian team, like if Messi said, I don't like this coach, he's gone.
Whereas Messi he got fucking Valverde sacked. Like, he has that power. He's
one player, and I've used an extreme example there of Messi, who's like, obviously God.
No, but that has actually happened. That's the thing. That's been proven.
But like, it could be, I'm kind of thinking back to Granit Xhaka throwing his armband at Emery, and that got Emery sacked. Like, that led to Emery going, like, Xhaka's discomfort of Emery, and like, I know there's other factors there as well, but like, that was like one player. That 17 players have signed this. 2 of them are currently injured, so wouldn't be playing anyway. But like, they have all come out saying, we do not feel this coach is good. We do not feel safe in his presence. And the Spanish FA are like, well, don't play for himself.
You won't be in his fucking presence.
It is. It's one of these things, and I'm glad Neil brought it up because it is actually infuriating. I was reading
even more infuriating. Sorry, they could have crossed you there when you were saying, oh, it's not just women getting involved in this. Oh, it's not just men getting involved in this. But the Spanish thing, it's not just the national FA getting involved in this. It's also the clubs as well, because no Real Madrid or Atletico Madrid player have signed this email, despite the fact that their players openly do support it. So,
but that's down to politics as well. Like, it's
and that was as a direct result of their club telling them not to get involved.
Yeah.
So you've got Gallardo and Moraza, they did so. And then Paredes, she didn't sign the email either, which was just from external pressure. She wasn't called up anyway. Like, this is fucking crazy. Like, this is absolutely insane. Like, their entire first team and like their entire first team squad, not just the guaranteed starting 11, have just turned it in. You're just like, what the fuck? Like, this is crazy. Like, so
that's this thing. This is what I'm trying to find out for myself. Like as a comparison, like I mentioned that those other movements in other walks of life, and it took particular watershed moments to do this, to actually exact change. And funny enough, it was a conversation I wanted to kind of have on this podcast already, particularly on the men's side, because we've had cases where, let's face it, like certain footballers we could mention have been sexually aggressive, and for the manner of speaking, they're either under investigation or they're kind of on the naughty step until they're proven to have done it. And of course, these investigations will slowly go away over time, and people choose to forget it. But like, does it take a watershed moment like these reports to actually cause a sort of almost like a wildfire change, or is this something they're going to try and suppress? Because, like I said, 3 clubs outright refused to support the investigation, tried to derail it essentially, and. As we said, like the NWSL is saying, they're doing the whole thoughts and prayers routine of saying, oh, this is terrible. Like, we're shocked to hear that this has happened, even though we've been told 7 years in a row this was happening. We just don't know what to do about it. It's like, well, how about you get people in that know what to do with it, or maybe prosecute some of the fucking cases.
Well, see, that's the point. When we're saying
there needs to be legal repercussions, not just people stepping down and going off back to their corporate
it's a token
desk
gesture.
job.
That's all that is. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things, like, prison is the only thing that really matters here. All right. That's people. You can ban people for life from fucking things. I mean, we'll bring up athletics. Let's go into another one. So one of the things the US Soccer, they issued a public statement, USSF.
Yeah.
They published a statement that they're going to establish an Office of Participant Safety. By the way, this is something the NWSL haven't done, which got stated that the NWSL have not come out with a public statement yet. I'm not saying they won't, but the USSF have, and they've said they'll establish an Office of Participant Safety to oversee conduct policies and reporting mechanisms. Word salad. Publish records from Safe Sport to publicly identify individuals in soccer who've been disciplined, suspended, or banned. All right, so you've got a Megan's Law kind of thing there, which, again, as we've said before, why the fuck aren't they doing that anyway? And thirdly, mandate a uniform minimum standard for background checks consistent with US OPC standards. But the thing is, that minimum standard for background checks exists in US athletics, like the Olympic athletics and the gymnastics thing. That didn't protect any of their participants from a particular nasty motherfucker called Nasser. Like, we did the whole
that's a
we did a whole other podcast. Dive. Yeah, we did a whole other fucking podcast to get into that. They do that. They do that already. Like, that doesn't protect them. So, like, so you've got three statements from their investigation findings that they will do. Two of them they really should be doing anyway, and one of those, well, other people do that, and it doesn't fucking protect it unless you back it up with, like, jailing motherfuckers. And the one that we haven't mentioned is pure word salad. Like, I'm going to establish an Office of Participant Safety to oversee conduct policies and report mechanisms. What the fuck does that even mean?
Yeah. That is someone to tick all the boxes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's literally someone to say, right, go around and issue out investigations, or like what we have in my workplace, which is drive-by inspections, which is like an inspector goes out and, randomly just checks that you've got all your paperwork in order and everyone's been up to date and everyone's forms are up to date, and then off you go. And then if you don't, then it's a monetary fine and therefore a monetary gain for the investigative officers.
Yeah.
So that is shite that in paper it could work, but I've not seen work in practice.
So there was an add-on to that. The USSF stated that they have already created a participant safety task force to coordinate efforts to implement the report's recommendations, with at least 1/3 of this membership being athlete representatives. All right, then. Let's see how that works out. And created a committee chaired by Danielle Slayton and US Club Soccer CEO Mike Colina to create an action plan to implement the recommendations due by the 31st of January 2023.
Yeah. Does anybody
else hear the sound of a can being kicked down the road?
Yes, yeah, but that is an action plan. It's to say because it's actually the action plan is saying these are things we would like to do. There's no obligation to get them done. You've given yourself a timeline of this, let's say whatever it was 2023, to have a look at it. But an action plan, by definition, is just like here's the things we would like to do, but there's no legal bounding to it. Now, if you're given a deadline, you must implement this by such date or it's dissolved. That's a different issue. But there's no legal pressure to actually implement any of that. It's just what we would like to do.
And also, deadlines can be pushed back. Like,
Absolutely,
as we said before, the NWSL and the NWSL LPA joint investigations, they haven't concluded yet. So there's a high chance that, like, if they're not concluded by, say, this January 31st, they'll just kick the can down further down the road to go, well, you know, we don't want to prejudice what they're going to be doing in their findings. So we're just going to wait until the NWSL joint investigations are going to come out. And who knows?
That's what the Red Star. That's what Chicago Red Stars did. They delayed. They tried to stall the investigation over 9 months because they just didn't. They wanted it to slow down and chunder and stop so that it would be relevant.
Yeah, it's the Man City strategy. You know, it's a Man City tactics. You know, they were financially doping. So what they did was they delayed the investigations until the statute of limitations on financial doping passed, and then they went and pled guilty. And they're like, oh yeah. And when they got hit with and all that did was they got hit with a fine, and the only thing they responded to that was, "Do you accept cash?"
Yeah.
Like, I understand you turn around and you say, "Oh well, you know, we've just realized this. You know, you have to give us a bit of time." I was thinking, well, okay, then fine, but like,
how much do you like? We're gonna check in up in 3 months, see what you've done.
But also, yeah, that's it. Like, you can check up, but also, like, they really need to state people are going to go to jail for this.
Yeah.
that has not been mentioned anywhere in any of the reports that I've seen. Like, there is no. Now, I bear in mind, I have not sat down and read both reports. I have read people's readings of the report. I've listened to
it's a pretty heavy report, like.
Yeah, but you can imagine, you can absolutely be certain that if those reports
if they had suggested it, that would be headline, you know, report, you know, recommends sentencing or deportation, or, you know,
lock these pricks up.
But that hasn't been mentioned, so therefore it shouldn't. You can imagine it's not been mentioned in the reports, but it all needs to be burnt down. Just burn it.
That's the thing. And the thing about the US sports, like, owners can be compelled to sell their clubs. Like, they don't need to be, you know, supporters of a totalitarian war baiting regime to be forced to sell a club a la.
What a strange thing to say, Neil. What a strange thing to say. That's weird.
Yeah.
So specific. It's almost like it's tweeted at something.
I think that's what we call them, literary thing. Subtext.
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
They're all cowards. But the thing is, like, in the US sport, you can't do that. The sponsors can just go, right, we're not giving you any fucking cash until these pricks go, or until you sell the club. And then, guess what? They sell the club. Like, hell, they move franchises from fucking different cities because of tax breaks. So, like, they can be, again, do that as well. Like, you know, just go, like, the entire management team of, say, Portland Thorns, like, you know, like, they all need to just go. Like, you know, the whole ownership structure, the direct coaches, the direct, you know, people with direct involvement with players, they need to go to prison, and the owners who are aware of all of this, they need to be forced to sell.
Yeah.
I think where this comes in is that some of the players weren't underage, so can be deemed that it was consensual. Like,
but it's coerced. Like, that's not
coercion.
That definition.
You know,
if I hold a gun to somebody's head and force them into something, I can't get off because they were over 18 when I held the gun to their.
But part of the thing is, you're looking at the laws in whatever state they're in America.
Yeah, that's also a big part of it too.
That is going to be a case where that is going to be coercion in one state, and it's family matter in another state.
Yeah. And
I think that's where that gray area, why they can't really prosecute like that. Yeah. Well, so that is my my deep dive. Well, it's not a deep dive, because if I was really doing a deep dive, we'd be here for fucking hours. But it's kind of my.
I'd need more than like a couple of cans.
Yeah.
We'd be into the whiskey by the end of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Not
look,
just the
I just
regular
hope
shit, like.
the NWSL gets its fucking shit together, and that, you know, if there are any issues in other leagues, that they are gotten rid of as quickly as possible, and don't let this bullshit of moving people around be the case in other leagues. And just like solidarity to the victims and to anyone who has been affected by this, because I think in all of the, I don't think we've mentioned one single victim's name. We've just been mentioning the fucking arsehole coaches.
Well, like I said, I want to respect their kind of privacy as well, like, because like Lord knows their names are gonna get dragged through the mud quite a bit just for having to prove it, like as is often the case with a lot of victims of sexual misconduct.
And
they
also,
have
there's so many of them. Like,
it's not,
like when you look at just a brief one on the Chicago Red Stars. Right. In 2021, the Red Stars retained a sports psychologist to interview their players anonymously. And the psychologist noted that 70% of their players that he had interviewed reported emotionally abusive behaviors.
Yeah.
This is like, even just naming the players, we'd be here all year. So I suppose that's probably why we're not bringing up any names. It is the privacy issues as well. And absolutely, I'm not making light of that. But I'm just simply stating that this isn't just a handful of players we're talking about. This is endemic, league-wide. Like one squad had a 70% hit rate, if you want to use that term. And you're like, I can't start naming names because it'd be beer all fucking week. Like, it's just absolutely.
You put them in fucking formations, like, that's it. Well, like I said, the only thing we can hope, even again, we're kind of looking at this from afar. The hope is that there will be a sort of, there needs to be, I don't think there's any internal pressure to get it done, but it certainly, there has to be external pressure, and it does need to come from places where these things are going to hurt, like sponsors, like public opinion, and so forth.
No, it's unfortunately it has to come from. It should like when bank robbers got interviewed. It's like, oh, why'd you rob banks? It's like, well, that's where all the money is.
Yeah.
It's much the same way. The only real change that's going to come from this, unfortunately, is sponsors when they turn around to go, right, we can actually pull out of our $50 million 3-year agreement to sponsor your club because, hey, you've hired a sexual predator and that doesn't agree with our values. And guess what? Our lawyers have stated that we can cancel this contract and not pay you a cent until you get rid of this motherfucker.
Yeah.
That's the only time.
By the way, we'll also accept your resignation as well because you covered him for 15 years.
Exactly. So, yeah. Well, your name is tarnished by association, so you have to go as well. Like, we'll only deal with people who aren't nonsense. You know, and unfortunately, it's the money men that will unfortunately force through change, and unfortunately, they're all sociopaths who only care about money. They don't give a fuck about people. Definitely don't give a fuck about women.
When you have a choice,
not many places do.
Yeah.
When you have a choice against sociopathic capitalists and neglective administrators, you know you're in a bad fucking spot, don't you? Like, it's like, is there any serial killers around we can emotionally relate to? Anybody around? No, they're all in prison. Fuck. Anyway, worth a shot.
Pretty much.
And